So today I want to talk about Amir Orr's poetry, the criticism and analysis and PowerPoint representation. All are by me, Rosa Jamali. When a language is a wound, never heals. Poetry and beyond. Amir Orr was born in 1956, born in Israel from parents of Polish origin. Narratology. I want to discuss all these items in my review. The narrator is not a persona. The narrator is an observer. That's totally different from mainstream Western poetry, the use of tales and anecdotes, Eastern storytelling, biblical narrative, allegory as a main device, biblical allusions, didactic parables. I'm gonna analyze this poem in the next slide, which is titled By the Temple. By the temple, Assad's begging bread, Abdullah's begging money. Nearby, among the booths of incense and charms, Mustafa's begging stars and Isa's begging love, stretching out their begging bowls, gaping. Mansour's begging truth from every passerby, Jalal begs freedom, Omar life, and he's begging nothing, yet no one gives him away. His begging bowls filled with glances and stares. Though alms, word alms, glances and stares. Without alms, word alms, air, fire, earth, kingdoms, elixirs, salvations. He turns his begging bowl upside down and empties it, yet it's still quite full. Dear self, he writes on it, fills it with wine to the brim, and drinks up in one gulp. Ah, it's not empty. He smashes his bowl in one go, broken pieces, yet it seems to be now even fuller, multiplied. By the temple, Assad's begging flesh, Mustafa pebbles, and Omar walls. By him, by the temple, there is no temple. I'd like to discuss the narratology of this poem, which is totally different from mainstream Western poetry. The poem By the Temple is a good example of that. In Eastern narratology, the narrator is not a persona, but he is the observer. The narrator is always alienated from the story and doesn't create a sense of sympathy. The narrator is the one who makes the audience get involved and decide. In By the Temple, a group of pilgrims are at the temple and ask for wealth. Day by day they get greedier, and at the end they decide to destroy the temple and take the ruined pieces home. Meanwhile, there is a true mystic around the temple with a cup of wine who doesn't ask for anything and doesn't care for transitional, mundane, worldly affairs, though his wish is granted sooner than all, or perhaps he can see the beyond and others can't. The story of greediness of human being, the one who doesn't beg, has been granted by abundance of wealth, unworldly insight, and salvation. The point here here is the kind of narrative the poet has applied, which is rather like a film narrative, showing one sequence of the beggars and the next sequence with the same setting but focused on the mystic and his cup of wine. It reminds me of parables of classic Persian mystics. In all those didactic pieces, the narrator makes a story to teach a point, and you're supposed to climb up even 7 stairs to seek God and become a true mystic. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales is not far apart, a group of pilgrims stories, kind of medieval setting. What I want to discuss next, roots and essence. For sure he has been inspired by the Song of Songs, been inspired by ancient Hebrew love poems, wisdom literature, a reading of monumental text, mingling the ancient and modern, Kabbalah and mysticism, a huge range of intertextuality to Jewish prayers. Let's discuss the linguistic patterns, roots and essence. Though the poems have been written in modern Hebrew and recognized as a landmark in contemporary Hebrew, yet you cannot dispense with the fact that the language per se brings ancient connotations, themes and settings to the present time. All these settings in Amir Or's poetry are mingled with ironies to the time being. You can feel the essence of ancient Hebrew mixed with the everyday settings of urban life. In a poem like "The City Will Be Overthrown," biblical allusions have been mixed with a narrative of modern time, yet you remember the Book of Lamentations here, all those apocalyptic pieces featuring a dystopian place. Collective unconscious of a nation, and here the poet doesn't act as an individual but the collective unconscious of a nation. Soon the city will be overthrown on mice and people, on lowered eyes at roadblocks, on the dead conquerors of mountains, on the image of their homeland's landscape. And maybe in this particular poem a sense of intertextuality is created with some biblical codes, characters, settings and themes. Poetics, metaphorical language, crystal imagery, emotional, sensational, confessional, symbolic, imagist, free verse, unrhymed couplets, epic tone. These are the features of his style and the poetics which we can see. Archetypal patterns. Let's read some lines of the Orpheus prayer. How many more years will we walk these dead sands? The mountain is glimpsed like a vision or a mirage. Sands move on underfoot like a memory with no beginning, and each place is every place. Thus does the way go up or down. Are you here behind my gaze? Is my gaze there ahead of me? Where have we come from? The Orpheus prayer. So you can see a number of archetypal patterns in this poem, like vegetation deity, mother nature, life cycle, old wise man, sacred journey. Archetypal patterns. The poem Lessons is rich in archetypal patterns, instances like vegetation deity, mother nature, life cycle, wise old man, sacred journey. From the depth of hummus to the scent of flowers, my good weight, my standing, my life. P-O-E-M, poem, the longest poem the poet has written, is full of archetypal visions of life and death. Holocaust imagery. The perfect murderer has no reasons, he said. The perfect murder needs only a perfect object, as it was in Auschwitz. not the crematoria, of course, but as it was. Afterwards, outside working hours, and he fell silent, looking at the froth on the beer and taking a sip. So you can see horrifying, appalling scenes of Holocaust and a vulgar range of vocabulary. Holocaust writes back. The poem A Glass of Beer is a masterpiece in creating horrifying, appalling scenes of the Holocaust. You see the Jewish annihilation anxiety in extreme here. The setting, which is quite dramatic and moving, represents a decadent society where killing can be a sort of amusement or a game probably, and that should be done perfectly. Unlike other poems, this particular piece takes some vulgar range of vocabulary to show the cruelty of a situation. Theosophy. The items I want to discuss here: archaic man, sacred moment, heterogeneous time, the setting is nowhere, mythic time in the past, the myth of eternal return, physical representation of the holy, and appearance of the holy. Sacred time. A sacred moment, according to Mircea Eliade, is the moment one can be omnipresent in a host of heterogeneous times and places. One can ignore the linear time and turn it to a cycle of times and places. Sacred time always involves a return to a paradigmatic mythic time in the past, the time of the creation. Here we can find evidence of the sacred moment in Amir Or's poetry. A moment in which time or place is not identified and has been taken place in so many diverse settings and times, could be anywhere or everywhere or nowhere, would be in no time or any time, should be in a host of heterogeneous times and places. That's why I feel lots of his poems have been written in the past or the time of creation, when and where Genesis happens. The Orpheus Prayer. How many more years will we walk these dead sands? The mountain is glimpsed like a vision or a mirage. Sands move on underfoot like a memory with no beginning, and each place is every place. Does the way go up or down? Are you here behind my gaze? Is my gaze there ahead of me? Where have we come from? Structuralist reading, close reading. The use of pronouns is something else which I'd like to mention. Sometimes some references are unclear and create some sorts of ambiguity in the interest of modern critics. This vague language of lamentation doesn't specify the good and the evil. It takes a tone as if all of us could be in the place of the sinners, where with no mercy and compassion we can all be cruel. Perhaps this shattered ego results in the elimination of I pronoun. That's why the poet nearly always narrates in third-person omniscient point of view and applies present perfect countlessly. Like seeing the earth palm, I touch and envy my touching hand. Touching, I yearn to touch. Amir or how? And this self-effacing other when he uses the pronoun I. Erotic poems. Hebrew love poetry has always been read by every passionate reader of poetry. The Song of Songs. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. May your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the wine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. May the wine go straight to my beloved, flowing gently over lips and teeth. Come, my beloved, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us go early to the vineyard to see if the wines have budded, If their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom, there I will give you my love. The mandrakes send out their fragrance, and at our door is every delicacy, both new and old, that I have stored up for you, my beloved. Song of Solomon. All these have been taken as pioneering pieces, but what has Amir added to love poems in Hebrew is passionate erotic pieces, full of crystal imagery and a haiku-like style. Moon. The animal between my legs howls to the animal between your legs. The moon between my teeth howls to the moon in your heart. The animal in my heart smells you always. Linguistic patterns. What I want to discuss. Modern Hebrew in poetry, a combination of old and new, ancient texts mingled with everyday settings. Old Hebrew prayers resonate in urban settings. Metaphors resonate the language of Hebrew Bible. Some innovations of poetic forms, either in the rhyme scheme or rhythm. Kabbalah and mysticism. You can see some Kabbalistic vision of love and eros, according to Moshe Idol, in some of these poems. In the poem When I Came to God, which sounds like the dialogue between a mystic and God, God has taken an androgynous identity, both feminine and masculine. When I came to God. When I came to God, I came blind. I heard all around me the song of his longing, his growl, his sigh, his slaughtered lowing. I touched with my palms his leaves, his down, the breath of his mouth, his back still warm. When I came to God, I came naked, tainted by his smell, voice and handprints. He was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. He was expelled, a fugitive and vagabond. When I came to God, I whispered to him, know yourself, and I hugged myself. When I came to God, I came alone. Hermeneutics. In hermeneutics, we discuss what the language is. Language has a self-referential entity. There is a sort of intertextuality which connects all the texts, that transcendental signifier beyond all, God's hidden name, perhaps. Wisdom literature. Quite comparable to the Psalms and wisdom literature, his poetry has a high number of allusions to scripture. The text creates itself through a rereading of monumental text. It's obvious that this narrative style has taken enough inspirations of them. Soon the city will be overthrown is highly referential to all these texts. Jewishness. And about Jewishness, a number of pillars of 20th century poetry were Jewish Anglophones. The one bears the most resemblance with Amir Orr's recent collection of poetry is Allen Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg was a confessional poet, and he wrote narrative pieces. The tone and the narrative in The City Will Be Overthrown reminds me of a number of Allen Ginsberg's poems, America and Kaddish. The morning tone in Allen Ginsberg's Kaddish is much alike. Ginsberg is the one who adopted so many urban industrial landscapes, a new terminology and documentary scenes, and so is Amir Orr. The poems which could be studied in this case are poems of reckoning in his recent collection of poems, Wings. Some lines of Yahweh and Allah battle by Allen Ginsberg. Maintain our separate identity, proud. History evermore. Defend our own bodies here, this holy land, this hill. Golgotha, never forget, never relinquish. inhabit through eternity under Allah, Christ, Yahweh, forever one God. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Ehad. La ilaha illallah, Oy Ah Hu, Oy Ah Hu. Shalom, Shanti, Salam. Joseph Brodsky, Adrian Rich, Gertrude Steins are among others we should mention here. Beyond the language. But language can create things and it can make things happen. As the poet says, language says, before language stands a language. Language is traces stained by over there. Language says, listen now, you listen here, was echo. This moment of existence to call things by names and create a language. This process of naming, an introduction to language poetry. And again, language is the hypertext and meta-language is the text. You can read my full review on this website, Goodreads. The links are available on this slide. Thank you.